looking at the content that they actually create, like movies and TV shows and video games, that these are the things that they believe. Because it's a lot easier to simply say that they believe these crazy things than actually show it. And so I actually want to take a look at all these things that they're producing so that you can see they're putting these ideas into their content. And the reason that they are doing that is because they want to slowly indoctrinate more and more people. It's like when you tell a fictional story and it's nonsensical, at first people reject it offhandedly. But the more you tell it and the more you put it in front of them, especially in this way, like subconsciously, they're speaking and teaching you on a subconscious level that these things are not absurd, that it's not crazy to think this, and that's how they get you. They keep showing it to you over and over and over and over again, until finally, because you've seen it so many times, it starts to seem plausible, like that actually could be the way it is. That could be the truth. But in reality, it's just that same absurdity from before. It's just now been wrapped in something appealing, and that is your favorite movie, or your favorite game, or your favorite book, or your favorite TV show. So that essentially what they've done is they've sugarcoated this lie, this absurdity, that if you would have heard it on its own, you would have rejected it wholeheartedly. But now they bring it to you wrapped in bows, and you swallow the whole thing, sugar-coatedness and the poisonous center, the lie, the absurdity that you would have never accepted on its own.
Personally, I think the unconquered south face is the only one worth scaling. It's a 20,000-foot sheer wall of ice, but that's never stopped me before.
Now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the earth. There's no place to go.
Aliens are real and US President Donald Trump knows about it. Israel's former space security chief has made an unprecedented claim in an interview. 87-year-old Chaim Eshed, who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 3 decades, has reportedly stressed that they are keeping aliens' existence a secret as humanity is not ready for them. There's an agreement between the US government and the aliens as they wish to research and understand the fabric of the universe, he further added. Not just that, Eshed reportedly went on to claim that Donald Trump stopped short of revealing their existence because the Galactic Federation insisted.
The disclosure.
Hey, are your ideas for global takeover falling apart? Are you losing sleep over humanity's mass awakening? Is false flag terrorism fizzling out? Global warming gone cold on you? Do you want those global warming deniers to just go away? Are all your phony economic crises being exposed? Is the price of gold defying all your attempts to fix it? Isn't killing the Gulf of Mexico and poisoning millions of people reducing the population fast enough for you? War, famine, and GM food not getting it done either? No? Well, don't give up. Get disclosure. You'll be able to unite mankind with a phony problem and enslave them with one world government and taxes. Yes, disclosure. Your one-stop shop for full spectrum dominance. But wait, there's more. Sign up for Disclosure today and you'll get problem, reaction, solution absolutely free. That's right, absolutely free. Act now to be entered into our fabulous propaganda prize draw. Disclosure. Our surveys show that 9 out of 10 world leaders prefer it. Disclosure. Cleansing the minds of the unwashed masses with a tantalizing, terrifying, taxable new reality. I'm only going to say this 3 times. Disclosure! Disclosure! Aliens may or may not be real. Your home may be at risk from those possible aliens. No major credit cards accepted because there is only one currency under a one world government. Prepare to die screaming, probably. Disclosure is compatible with Project Bluebeam. Do not employ critical thinking.
This is CNN breaking news.
The president made a brief statement calling the message from Vega one of the most stunning insights into our
attendance at religious services has risen a dramatic 39% in recent days.
As police in 3 German armed divisions clashed with neo-Nazi protesters.
So it turns out there's life on other planets. Boy, this is really going to change the Miss Universe contest, don't you think? I mean, gee, we're going to have to...
Health officials from around the world are concerned that the message from Vega might trigger a rash of mass suicides, not unlike the recent cult deaths near San Diego.
Even a scientist has to admit that there are some pretty serious religious overtones to all this.
Let's hear from someone whose organization has been accused of conducting its own inquisition in recent days. Richard Rank, head of the Conservative Coalition.
Thank you. This is yet another example of science intruding into matters of faith. Now they will have us set a place at the table for politics.
They have been reacting to TV signals they got from us in the 1930s. They're just getting them. Imagine how disappointed they're going to turn out to be if they're Cubs fans. I mean,
we now take you to Jeremy Roth, who is reporting on events at the Very Large Array near Socorro, New Mexico.
Like a bolt from the blue it came. What is being called the message from Vega has caused thousands of believers and non-believers to descend upon the VLA facility here in the remote desert of New Mexico. Many have come to protest, many to pray, but most have come to participate in what has become the best show in town.
Well, I saw the thing coming out of the sky. It had one long horn and one big eye. I commenced to shaking and I said, ooh-wee. Looks like a purple people eater to me. It was a one-eyed, one-horned, blind purple people eater. One-eyed, one-horned, blind purple people eater. I wanted to be a spaceman. That's what I wanted.
But they have failed. It's the same people who again and again have brought us to the brink of destruction, who polluted our air, who poisoned our water. Now these scientists have had their chance. Are these the kind of people that you want talking to your God for you?
Hello? NASA's Rob Simon made this, and it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Although we weren't able to shatter that highest, hardest glass ceiling this time, thanks to you, it's got about 18 million cracks in it. And it may be hard to see tonight, but we are all standing under a glass ceiling right now. And the light is shining through like never before, filling us all with the hope and the sure knowledge that the path will be a little easier next time.
The Los Altos Drive-In Theater, once located at 2800 North Bellflower Boulevard in Long Beach, California, where I watched such classics as Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, and, in its final hours before closing, Jurassic Park, is now a typical shopping mall, complete with the ho-hum drum of a Papa John's Pizza and Kmart. Upon its wide release on June 11, 1982, E.T. invaded every American city and suburb. Within 2 weeks, Reese's Pieces sales tripled. Variety's McCarthy critiqued E.T. as the best Disney film Disney never made. Mrs. Hadley would have been only a few blocks away and just as many weeks old when I participated in my own screening of the film from the front seat of the family wagon. And I can distinctly recall walking around the church parsonage in Hawthorne, California, endlessly rehearsing E.T. phone home, E.T. phone home. This is likely due to the fact that my parents documented those persistent words on cassette tape, and for years thereafter, I wore out the ribbon by rewinding and playing my performance on the very Japanese-made Panasonic that had earlier recorded it. But I wasn't the only one. Neil Diamond wrote a hit song, Heartlight, based on the film's central tropes. Michael Jackson not only purchased one of the working puppets used in the film, but in a somewhat more masterful performance than my own, can be heard crying at E.T.'s death during his own special LP-length recording. At President Reagan's request, Spielberg held a private screening in the White House. The First Lady cried during the film's third act. Then again, so did the Gipper. Spielberg told Twilight Zone magazine, "The leader of the free world could not withhold a little moisture in his eyes." He added, "I view that as a very positive sign." On the 17th of September, E.T. made an unprecedented appearance at United Nations headquarters in New York City. Twilight Zone magazine writer David Schifrin was on hand to witness the event and interview its director. He wrote, E.T.'s United Nations debut came before a standing room only crowd of foreign dignitaries, consulate members, and UN staffers who saw the young director receive the UN's Medal of Peace, the first time the prestigious award has ever gone to a filmmaker. They then watched a special showing of Spielberg's blockbuster hit E.T. Schifrin adds, despite the event's formal setting, the UN's spacious trusteeship council chamber, where almost every seat bears an official placard naming a member country, the audience was completely swept up by the film. They applauded enthusiastically during the closing credits, particularly for Spielberg's name, and cheered during the more exciting scenes. The UN and E.T. are one and the same, Spielberg said in his acceptance speech. They both have the desire and the need to communicate, to care, and to love. This film is dedicated to all children of all ages. Further voicing approval for the UN, Spielberg concluded, the United Nations represents everything that E.T. stands for, love and communication. E.T.'s arrival at the UN did nothing to massage the nerves of right-wing evangelicals. Eschatological-minded Christians had long been suspicious of the UN's potential to fulfill the prophecies of the Apostle John. By making this the case in The Late Great Planet Earth, Christian Zionist and dispensationalist author Hal Lindsey prompted an entire baby boomer generation to gaze up at the clouds for the Lord's return, while science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke had already called out the aliens' bluff, detailing them as your run-of-the-mill biblical devil, and then being so bold and perverse to glory at their destined arrival in childhood's end, published in 1953. The books of Christian author Frank Peretti would be instrumental in cementing the alien-demon connection. The blood of American radio host and televangelist Bob Larson simply boiled over the connections he made between rock music and Satanism. His book, Satanism, The Seduction of America's Youth, persuaded countless parents that forces were influencing America's youth through ghoulish games, horror films, black metal music, and drugs, as well as occult enticements, in hopes of selling their souls to Satan. Dungeons & Dragons was criminalized in the church, and as most online reviews by a grown and apparently bitter millennial will show, Phil Phillips' book, Turmoil in the Toy Box, published in 1986, pillaged and plundered the playtime carpets of countless childhoods by convincing their parents that He-Man, G.I. Joe, Star Wars, My Little Pony, and Smurfs were laced with occult ties. I remember it well. If Turmoil in the Toy Box was a war, then I was in the trenches. It was something we didn't realize at the time, but now it looks like a low-scale version of the McCarthy-era paranoia around communism, said Peter Bebergal, author of Season of the Witch, How the Occult Saved Rock and Roll, in an interview with IO9. He further said, the devil worshippers could be anywhere. They could be your next door neighbor. They could be your child's caregiver. He furthermore added, a lot of it was having a spiritual vacuum created by the fact that the 1960s promise of the cosmic spiritual consciousness didn't really pan out. Then you had this 1960s uptick of paranormal investigations, ESP, and interest in UFOs, really climaxing with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But the aliens never actually landed, you know? I think it led to a cynicism that led to a kind of cultural paranoia. There is no meaning. There was already an uptick in fundamentalist Christianity. The Reagan right had begun to dominate politics, and it was the beginning of a cultural war. That's when the Parents Music Resource Center started to put labels on album covers to warn against profanity or even references to the occult. It was a perfectly ripe stew for satanic panic. In a way, believing that Satan is running the world is still offering a kind of order to things, in a world that can feel very disorderly. And yet the satanic panic which once sent the baby boomer generation into a tailspin is no more. More precisely, it is but a whimper, already doomed to messy backfiling in the annals of discomforted minds. Somewhere along the way, the Christian dusted his devil-worshipping Led Zeppelin album off and returned it straightway to the turntable, callously shrugging as he did so. Despite Jimmy Page's lifelong devotion to Aleister Crowley, I can only deduce that songs like Highway to Heaven, particularly Page's clear pronunciation of Hail Satan when played backwards, means little but theatrics to the haphazard person who deceives himself into claiming a love for the Lord while singing along. The devil's music has become family entertainment. For many, and dare I say most, the spirit is thoroughly quenched. Looking back on it all, there is a tragically missed opportunity in Christian musician Keith Green's 1977 song, Nobody Believes in Me Anymore, which was written from Satan's perspective and played as an anthem for the satanic panic generation. Most seem to paint the Satanist with shades of Shakespeare, the double-double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble of the three witches of Macbeth, or Wayward Sisters, one of the most famous lines in English literature, rather than the real thing. Rumors of poisoned Halloween candy and drug-like childcare workers abounded, in part thanks to daytime television. Mention of the Kabbalist, the alchemist, or the mystics of science were altogether muted. In the end, the satanic panic crowd based much of its content on broad-sweeping theatrical generalizations, chasing after wind-swept caricatures and the elongated shadows of gnats, rather than real magic, the kind which saturates our very cognition through the alpha waves of television and with the potency to program, the kind of magic which sends men to the moon and, in the most delusional of indoctrination power, changes the shape of the earth.
By directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. Aliens are going to be gone fast. The American astronaut embodied the incredible spirit of America, the confidence of a cowboy, the skill of a fighter pilot, the ambition of a scientist, and the courage of a true, brilliant, tough warrior.
We are going in with first wave. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has your leg. You get me? We get you, sir.
But they will face an enemy more devastating than any ever imagined.
Does the president believe in the existence of UFOs?
Somehow that question hasn't come up in our back and forth over the last couple days, but I will check into that and be happy to circle back.
And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
We're under attack, sir. We need retrieval now.
We're going to have the Space Force.
Someone made a damn mistake.
Somebody criticized me the other day because they asked me what I do, and I said, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. They've got to be stopped.
TriStar Pictures takes you to the front lines.
Get them out of here! Get out! Kill them all! Space Force.
Troopers.
There is absolutely nothing Americans can't do. When we get together, there's nobody even close.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
The drink the astronauts took to the moon.
Astronauts to the moon.
Phil Phillips is clearly a man of God. After publishing Turmoil in the Toy Box and its follow-up Saturday Morning Mind Control, authoring 15 books in total and selling 1.3 million copies, and succumbing to a stool and dunce cap of ridicule, he has become the president of God Loves Kids, a missions organization caring for almost 4,000 children and which currently builds orphanages in Nepal. As a Christian, Phillips is the real deal. He came to warn us. Most didn't listen. The thing is, much like the Satanic Panic movement which prompted him to action, many of his ideas seem ill-considered. For example, when warning parents of the occult's almost omnipresence in E.T., he seems to get some details wrong in the investigation, such as the children playing Dungeons and Dragons in the opening scene, which makes me wonder if he actually saw the movie to begin with. And according to Phillips, E.T., and he quotes, tells Elliot that he'll always be with him in his heart. For someone playing the part of town squire, he tragically mismanages an important detail, assuming he took the time to see the movie at all. E.T. doesn't tell Elliot he'll be with him in his heart. What E.T. actually accomplishes to get away with is far more frightening, and precisely why the Satanic Panic crowd seem to be grasping at straws, rather than the truth behind their spiritual discretion. The movement perished for lack of knowledge. With a glowing fingertip, E.T. points to the boy's forehead and assures him, "I'll be right here." By turning our attention to Elliot's third eye, E.T. has just given himself away. He is not truly a cosmic traveler. He is as old as the angels, which according to Enoch, conspired to take human wives on Mount Hermon. With his long glowing fingers reaching out like the hand of God in Michelangelo's famous painting, an image used for the film's promotion and which seemingly went unchallenged by the church, E.T. is Elliot's astral guide. Even Neil Diamond seemed to get the memo. With Heartlight, he wrote, "Turn on your heartlight in the middle of a young boy's dream. Don't wake me up too soon. Gonna take a ride across the moon, you and me." Further generalizations and unsubstantiated rumors only make Phillips' claims ill-considered when he reports a recent, and he quotes, conversation with one screenwriter of E.T., a man deeply troubled at his involvement with the movie. He told me about the visual subliminals the screenwriters wove into the movie, many of which were specifically designed to enhance the reputation of and change the nation's thinking about the homosexual community. This is as far as Phillips dares to go, perhaps because he did not actually have the capacity to recognize subliminal homosexuality while keeping on the lookout for them. He could have mentioned the shed where Elliot first meets E.T., or the Reese's, which he cleverly coaxed him to his bedroom with, or the woman's clothing which Gertie dresses him in, or the fact that E.T. was never conclusively identified as male or female. This is important. In fact, Spielberg confessed to writing E.T. as an asexual creature, which only complicates the film's budding pubescent sexuality. Consider E.T. getting drunk with an indiscriminate portion of beer. Telepathically, which is an occult practice by the way, Elliot also succumbs to drunkenness at school. When E.T. watches John Wayne kiss Maureen O'Hara in a televised broadcast of John Ford's The Quiet Man, we are left to ponder whether E.T. was sexually stimulated by Wayne or O'Hara. And when it comes to subliminal messaging, let's not overlook the rainbow, which clearly breaks God's own laws of natural science to paint a starry sky at E.T.'s departing. One thing is certain. Those who refused to acknowledge the work of Satan in the world were immediately capable of critiquing the film's underbelly to America, and with remarkable acuteness. Why did the Satanic Panic crowd struggle to do so? As the 1980s dawned, conservative familialism was maintained under the protection of patriarchal culture and sought to vilify unconventional families, such as gays and lesbians, as well as single parents. It actually mirrored the Satanic Panic with its widespread fear that a battle of good versus evil was raging just below the surface of American culture, in the face of soaring divorce rates, which more than doubled between 1970 and 1980, and widespread invocations to sustain marriages at all cost. E.T. simply spun that around and gave us a look at the alternative. Actually, that alternative brought America to tears. Whatever the outcome of Elliot's blossoming sexuality may prove to be, one thing remained certain. His father had run off to Mexico with another woman, and his mother was on the verge of emotional collapse. And yet, the child of divorce could not only survive, but also thrive. In short, the family would get along just fine. After its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, film critic Pauline Kael wrote in The New Yorker, "It is bathed in warmth and seems to clear all the bad thoughts out of your head." Film critic Marina Hung maintained that the endearing appeal of E.T. inheres in the dissolution of the nuclear heterosexual family over the later half of the 20th century and the concomitant threat posed by this disintegration to many believers in the nuclear heterosexual family's powerful and presumably positive effect on child development. It is an odd little story between an alien and a child, wrote Thomas of The Guardian, which clears those bad thoughts. In the E.T. storybook, I picked it up in a thrift store, based in part on Melissa Matheson's screenplay and released with the movie's premiere, author William Kotzwinkle describes the alienated alien with all the zig and zag lines of a modern Renaissance man, the artist, inventor, healer. His race is described with, and he quotes, misshapen heads, their drooping arms and roly-poly sawed-off torsos. One might mistake him for a goblin with his enormous bulbous eyes and webbed feet coming almost directly out of his low-hanging belly and his long hands trailing along ape fashion behind it. What particularly strikes my interest is the mystical woods, still untouched by the bulldozer, and which rises high above Elliot's suburban home, where we first meet him. Bunched together among the flora, one might mistake them for little old elves caring for their misty moonlit gardens, which would, according to Kotzwinkle, make one think of Elfland, and the tenderness they showed the plants might add to this impression. E.T. and his crew of botanists were very old, for they had collected everything that grew or had grown on Earth throughout its existence, including what only remains now in fossil form, imprinted in coal. The botanist has had millions of years' experience on Earth. This Kotzwinkle assures us. E.T. is the perfect description of the Watchers who, for thousands of years, have invigorated the mystery religion and cultivated the wisdom as well as sciences of Eastern and Western civilization. Kotzwinkle adds, he loved Earth, especially its plant life, but he liked humanity too, and always, when his heart light glowed, he wanted to teach them, guide them, give them the stored intelligence of millions of years. Space itself is the grand illusion. Being first and foremost a botanist, we find E.T.'s meaning in the pagan religion from which he originated from, animism and pantheism. The little garden gnome not only watched over the physical preservation of Earth's vegetation, but their souls. Wandering off the fire road into Elliot's backyard, a path which carried him down like a god from the mountain, Kotzwinkle further elaborates on his extraordinary gifting. He writes, something in the yard was sending soft signals. He turned and saw the vegetable garden. He crept towards it, embraced an artichoke, and asked the vegetables what he should do. Their advice, to go and look in the kitchen window, was not welcome. The artichoke insisted, grunting softly, and the extraterrestrial crept off obediently. A little later, when the pizza delivery person arrives, E.T. panics. There's nothing to fear, said a tomato plant. It's only the pizza wagon. When E.T. dove into the shed to protect himself, he found tools, particularly a dipping fork with which to defend himself. Don't stab yourself in the foot, said a little potted ivy. E.T. could feel the life of the orange diminish as it was plucked from a tree. Like a true fairy of theosophy, E.T.'s spirit seemed interlocked with a common houseplant. When E.T. died, so did the geranium. There is another ingredient to E.T.'s role as a watcher of old. He was conjured. Elliot's mother, Mary, only recently divorced and in dire need of excitement in her life, we are told by Kotzwinkle, looked strangely upon her two sons and their friends as they played Dungeons and Dragons with their six-sided cube in her kitchen, which is described as a rubble of a ruined city of crush bottles, potato chip bags, books, papers, calculators. She tries to make sense of their talk. One voice says, so you get to the edge of the forest, but you make a truly stupid mistake, so I'm calling in the wandering monsters. And then another, can I get wandering monsters called out for just befriending a goblin? Steve's dungeon master. That would be her son Michael. He's got absolute power. Absolute power, Mary sighs, but she couldn't even get them to dry a dish. And then Elliot, she recognizes the voice of her second-born. He shouts, I run down the road, they're after me. Just when they're about to get me and they're really mad, I throw down my portable hole. I climb in and pull the lid closed. Presto, disappeared into thin air.
Yeah, tractor beam. Sucked me right in.
I was going to say thank you very much. I mean, that's, as a science journalist, my question is, through your career and your writing and your acting, you've inspired so many people to enter the sciences. How do you balance science with science fiction? They're both the same.
I'm excited about it, and the idea is to democratize space, to lower the cost of getting to many destinations in our solar system. And the reason you do this, everybody, the reason a society does this, there are two questions, Lauren, that we have all asked. Where did we come from? How did we all get here? Where did we come from? And are we alone in the universe? And if you want to answer those two questions, you have to explore space.
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. We'd have way better CGI if it was fake. And you know, the colors all look kind of weird in space. There's no atmospheric occlusion. You know, like everything looks too crisp. I mean, it's kind of silly and fun, but I think that's, you know, silly fun things are important, and I think that's just the imagery of it is something that's going to get people excited around the world. And it's still tripping me out. I mean, I'm tripping balls here. Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. You can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. Like, we'd have way better CGI if it was fake. It's still tripping me out because it looks so fake, honestly.
So you spin, you know, when you spin pizza dough, it kind of flattens out. Yeah. Gets wider in the middle. And so Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning. And it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere. It's oblate. And officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
Portable hole. If only I had one to disappear into, Mary thought. What she doesn't realize, what none of them do, is that an actual demon is being conjured through the ritual. In fact, Elliot has rather arrogantly laid out a precise plan of action for his astral guide in the days to come. Within moments, the two will meet under the light of a waxing moon, like something from Aleister Crowley's Moonchild. We should recognize some semiotics at play. It is rather Kabbalistic in nature, because the letters E and T begin and end with the protagonist, Elliot, therefore foreshadowing the mystical connection that the two will share. That said, the feminine moon, with her wealth of esoteric potency, is a major player in the unfolding drama, despite not being listed in the closing credits. E.T. and Elliot's soaring flight on a bicycle made for two will bypass the light of the moon at its fullest. This will occur on Halloween night, which is also the ancient druidic festival of Samhain, a dreadfully important moment in the pagan and occult ritual calendar. It is the night when the gates and doors to the other world are opened, and the spirits of the dead enter our realm. It is also the very night in which E.T. sets up his computer to call upon them. This is precisely the significance of the shadow government scientist played by real-life Marxist Peter Coyote, but whom we only know as Keys. For most of the movie, we never see Coyote's face, only the keys jingling from his belt. On the esoteric level, his flashlight reminds us of the hidden knowledge which pierces the darkness. However, we need also reference the Key of Solomon and occultist texts of the Italian Renaissance, typical of Renaissance occult science, which is inaccurately ascribed to King Solomon but deals with conjurations, invocations, and curses to summon and constrain spirits of the dead and demons in order to compel them to do the operator's will. Aleister Crowley translated one version of it. With E.T., the scientists of the shadow government are none other than wizards attempting to summon a botanical gnome, not spacemen. Considering all this and what we know of Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, and Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which created the American space program, the fact that government esoterics arrived to apprehend E.T. dressed as NASA astronauts lends further credence to this movie representing one massive ceremony. Imagery stylized after a Kubrick movie seems to fill every frame. Remember when an intoxicated E.T. watches John Wayne kiss Maureen O'Hara on the television? While this transpires, we cut to Elliot's classroom, where 3 distinct posters depict Voyager, Jupiter, and Io. Voyager was the mission that sent probes to Jupiter and Saturn in the late 1970s, all thanks to Jet Propulsion Laboratory. In Magia Sexualis, author Hugh Urban described Crowley's use of sex magic as a powerful means to shatter the limited rational mind and finite human ego. He writes, however, the ultimate goal that Crowley sought through his sexual magic went far beyond the mundane desire for material wealth or moral power. In his most exalted moments, Crowley believed that he could achieve a supreme spiritual power, the power to conceive a divine child, a godlike being who would transcend the moral failings of the body born of a mere woman. This goal of creating a divine fetus, Crowley suggests, lies at the heart of many esoteric traditions, from ancient Mesopotamia to India to the Arab world. This is the great idea of magicians in all times, to obtain a messiah by some adaptation of the sexual process. In Assyria, they tried incest. Greeks and Syrians, mostly bestiality. The Mohammedans tried homosexuality. Medieval philosophers tried to produce one by making chemical experiments with semen. But the root idea is that any form of procreation other than normal is likely to produce results of a magical character. Sex magic, particularly in its transgressive, non-reproductive forms, can thus unleash the supreme creative power, the power to create not an ordinary fetus, but a magical child of messianic potential. Even the movie itself was filmed in a ceremonious fashion. If one watches the DVD commentary, Drew Barrymore reminisces that E.T. was like a guardian angel for them, insisting that he was almost real. We can surmise that E.T. is a type of reptilian creature, which is best hinted at when he telepathically commands Elliot to free the frogs moment after screenwriter Melissa Matheson's husband, Harrison Ford, tells his class the frogs won't feel a thing. E.T. has Kundalini energy about him, a serpent presence, or what the occultists would gladly call the light bearer.
When you look at anything in the occult, all you have to do is compare it to the Bible. You're going to find out just about everything in the occult was either reversed or perverted from the Holy Scriptures. In the end, you're going to find out that Lucifer has never had an original idea yet.
The New Age movement is the modern-day popularization of occultism, which has been one of the main objectives of the Theosophical Society. In her book, The Key to Theosophy, Blavatsky stated that one of the primary means of building a global brotherhood of man would be, quote, to encourage the study of those laws least understood by modern people, the so-called occult sciences. The occult sciences, stated Blavatsky, help develop and cultivate, quote, the hidden powers latent in man, thus giving him tremendous advantages over more ignorant mortals. The occult sciences include magic, mediumship or channeling, hypnosis, alchemy, and astrology, all of which are very popular in the New Age.
You have multiple books in here on astrology, telepathy, and just various books on magic.
The New Age Almanac notes the success of Blavatsky's endeavor to spread occultism in the West. Quote, several hundred new occult organizations can be traced directly to the Theosophical Society. For example, drawing upon the esoteric work initiated by Theosophy, ritual magicians have attempted to attain the mastery of the world through occult means, in a measure only hinted at in Theosophical circles. Theosophy also nurtured a reborn astrology. Beginning with minuscule astrological groups in the late 19th century, astrology made an astounding comeback to become the most pervasive popular occult practice in the latter part of the 20th century. Like the New Age movement, the primary aim of occultism is the pursuit of the expansion or evolution of consciousness and the attainment of Christhood through spiritual initiation. Occultist Rudolf Steiner is a perfect example of this idea, as a collection of his lectures is entitled The Evolution of Consciousness as Revealed Through Initiation Knowledge. Aleister Crowley, arguably the most notorious occultist and Satanist of all time, is an even more profound example of the occult roots of the New Age. Author Nicholas Campion sums up Crowley's New Age lineage and his influence in the development of New Age thought. Quote, there were two important currents of New Age prophecy in the 20th century West until the 1950s. One was embedded in the Theosophical and esoteric tradition, promoted by Alice Bailey, Rudolf Steiner, and Carl Jung. The other was magical, promoted by Aleister Crowley, and emphasized paganism and decadence. Crowley's vision of a new global religion, his understanding of all great prophets as manifestations of a single essence, and his desire to restore the West by teaching the East to the West mark him out as an heir to Blavatsky. Crowley's esotericism was by and large unoriginal. However, his most important contribution to New Age thought was to provide a statement of universal rights. Crowley's philosophy was fundamentally New Age. He propounded New Age ideas such as the following, quote, happiness lies within oneself. Every man and every woman is a star, and the infinite unity is our refuge. Since if our consciousness be in that unity, we shall care nothing for the friction of its component parts, and our light is the inmost point of illuminated consciousness. He believed that through meditation, quote, the consciousness of the many may be melted to that of the one, leading to the, quote, expansion of consciousness to that of the infinite, which, as I previously cited, was exactly how Alice Bailey defined the New Age initiation process. This is a clear sign that occultism, Satanism, and the New Age movement are part of the same spiritual phenomenon.
And I love what you said about the evolution of the next consciousness.
What's evolving is consciousness. Consciousness is the thing that's evolving, and it expands in every way it can.
We are also granted the gift of experiencing an expansion within our own consciousness.
Through the expansion of consciousness.
We are moving away from this separation consciousness and moving into unity, oneness consciousness.
The solar flares, the vibrational frequency is actually awakening all of us, and we're awakening as one.
Because you are connected in consciousness to everybody. We need to come together in mutual acknowledgement that we're all the same consciousness having different experiences. The change consciousness is about oneness, unity of everything.
Alice Bailey made it very clear that occultism was the source for her view of the Christ, and she believed that this New Age occult Christ would soon overthrow the Jesus of traditional Christianity. Quote, it can be expected that the Orthodox Christian will at first reject the theories about the Christ which occultism presents. At the same time, this same Orthodox Christian will find it increasingly difficult to induce the intelligent masses of people to accept the impossible deity and the feeble Christ which historical Christianity has endorsed. Occultism presents a Christ who is present and living, who is known to those who follow him, who is a strong and able executive and not a sweet and sentimental sufferer, who has never left us, but who has worked for 2,000 years through the medium of his disciples, the inspired men and women of all faiths, all religions, and all religious persuasions, who sees divinity in them all, and who comprehends the techniques of the evolutionary development of the human consciousness. These ideas the intelligent public can and will accept. Then the picture of a Christ demanding a unique position to the exclusion of all other sons of God will fade out in the wonder of the true apostolic succession, in which many sons of God, on different rays, of differing nationalities and with varying missions, are to be seen historically leading humanity along the path of divine unfoldment and nearer to God, the source. Occult or esoteric means that which is hidden or secret, and refers to knowledge only known to the initiated. Occult teachings are usually associated with the idea of spiritual awakening, which is a very popular idea in the New Age. One becomes awakened when they have learned a hidden truth about the world and themselves, and thus they become initiated into the secrets or mysteries of the ages.
We're moving into this new age of Aquarius, and it's going to be an awakening for everyone again.
It's sort of an awakening that happens in consciousness.
And I think that there is more of an awakening.
This great awakening is just about to take place.
It is the awakening of the Christ principle in humanity.
You're expanding.
I was expanding in more of a positive direction.
Yeah.
There has been an awakening.
Mankind's first awakening, according to the occult, occurred in the Garden of Eden, when the serpent revealed a great mystery to Eve that God had kept hidden from her, that she could become like God if she partook of the tree of knowledge. This was the first initiation. By eating of the tree of knowledge, Eve was initiated into the mysteries. She discovered her true identity and became God. This has been the foundational teaching in the occult and mystery schools for centuries, that in the Garden of Eden, the serpent was the arbiter of mankind's initiation into godhood and imparted the ageless wisdom. This is what Madame Blavatsky meant when she stated that Satan, the serpent of Genesis, is the real creator and benefactor, the father of spiritual mankind, and that Satan can only be regarded in the light of a savior. Aleister Crowley similarly stated, "This serpent, Satan, is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade know thyself and taught initiation." Alice Bailey also confirmed that the roots of initiation are found in the Garden of Eden and the serpent's temptation to eat of the tree of knowledge. Quote, "Initiation leads to the cave where the secret of good and evil is revealed." This explains how the ancient mysteries or ageless wisdom has retained the same core body of teachings through the centuries, because they have descended from the same spiritual father, the serpent. This is why the mystery schools, which are the ancient ancestor religion of today's New Age movement, worship the serpent as the bringer of divine wisdom. In Isis Unveiled, Madame Blavatsky confirmed that the serpent was the supreme god of the mystery schools. Quote, "The Hierophants, moreover, of Egypt as of Babylon, generally styled themselves the sons of the serpent god, or sons of the dragon, because in the mysteries, the serpent was the symbol of wisdom and immortality." Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Freemason and one of the most well-known experts on ancient and esoteric wisdom, also confirms the Christ-like importance of the serpent in the mystery schools. Quote, "The initiates of the mysteries were often referred to as serpents, and their wisdom was considered analogous to the divinely inspired power of the snake. Among nearly all these ancient peoples, the serpent was accepted as the symbol for wisdom or salvation. Notwithstanding statements to the contrary, the serpent is the symbol and prototype of the universal Savior, who redeems the world by giving creation the knowledge of itself and the realization of good and evil. The accepted theory that the serpent is evil cannot be substantiated. It is the symbol of the reincarnation, which was common to many of the ancient mystery schools. What's interesting is that the Bible actually prophesies the rise of the mystery schools, which consist of the serpent's spiritual offspring or followers. As the Bible makes clear, the offspring of the serpent would be engaged in a long and hostile spiritual war with God's Son, the true Messiah sent to undo the damage done by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. In Genesis chapter 3, almost immediately after Adam and Eve's encounter with the serpent and their subsequent betrayal of God's command, God foretells the coming of the Messiah and the ensuing conflict that would arise between the Messiah and the serpent's offspring. Speaking to Satan, God says in Genesis 3:15, quote, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He, that is Jesus Christ, will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This one verse explains centuries of spiritual war between the mystery schools and those who follow the God of the Bible. And it also implies that these are really the only two types of people in the world, those who follow the God of the Bible and those who follow the serpent. It also makes perfect sense of why occultists like Alice Bailey, being the offspring of the serpent, consistently take issue with the Jesus Christ of the New Testament, and why the mystery schools and Christians have for so long battled over who the true Savior is. Also, Satan, in an obvious attempt to discredit the true Jesus Christ and lead people away from true salvation, has created his own occult or Aquarian Jesus, who has supposedly been suppressed by Bible-believing fundamentalist Christians. This is Spiritual Warfare 101, and it is this occult Christ whom Alice Bailey and the Lucis Trust claim is soon returning. According to the Bible, Adam and Eve's partaking of the tree of knowledge was a disastrous event that led to mankind's fall into sin and separation from God. Yet the occult New Age, interpreting the event from the other side, claims Adam and Eve's encounter with the serpent was a revolution in mankind's development toward higher consciousness. Rather than living in paradise, as the Bible claims, Adam and Eve were imprisoned by Jehovah, spiritually unconscious, stuck living a mere animal existence, and the serpent came to liberate them with the gift of divine consciousness. The teaching of the serpent as the great initiator and savior of mankind is currently gaining worldwide acceptance through the New Age movement, which ultimately aims to precipitate the next Garden of Eden event by helping humanity ascend the ladder of spiritual evolution and unlocking the next level of consciousness.
Let me take you on a trip around the world and back, and you won't have to move, you just sit still. Now let your mind do the walking, now let my body do the talking. Let me show you the world with my eyes.
And the short answer is, of course, that it absolutely promotes occultism and the New Age so strongly it could hardly be overstated. And in fact, I was honestly really taken aback by just how uncomfortable I felt sitting through that movie. So it left such a heavy impression on my spirit that honestly I had to ask God to forgive me for going to see it. And consequently, I was somewhat reluctant at first to even talk about this movie because I didn't want to come across like I was encouraging people to see it. I mean, even if they were like me going to see it out of curiosity or for research purposes or whatever. But then again, I realized that most people who were inclined to go see it have probably already done so, and those that haven't probably aren't going to go see it just because of this video, and especially if I'm able to do any justice to the points that I intend to make about the story itself and its blatant Gnostic agendas. And speaking of which, that was essentially why I chose to start off with this clip showing the Doctor in his first encounter with the so-called Ancient One, who gives him this rude awakening to the multiverse of spiritual dimensions by pressing upon his third eye, and sends him hurtling through all these mind-bending dimensional gateways and transcendent teachings and all that stuff. And so very early on in the movie, this scene rapidly starts bombarding the audience with core New Age concepts such as the physical realm being an extension of consciousness itself, and how all these realms and realities can be manipulated if only you learn the rules by which they're governed. And they actually portray the whole idea of fractals, and fractals being an expression of how everything is connected to everything, and everything is repeated throughout all of creation, and the large and the small and all that. But, I mean, the whole thing is just a celebration of occultism, obviously. And literally, the hero is a sorcerer. And specifically, he's a sorcerer who started out as a believer in materialistic science and in rationalism and the purely physical world, who then has his entire paradigm shattered. And he goes through this sort of rebirth into a new understanding that ancient Eastern philosophy and the mystic arts are, far more real than he'd ever imagined, and blah, blah, blah. So that, of course, is highly symbolic, representing, what the audience and the society as a whole is intended to eventually experience as well. That transition from the modernist materialist paradigm back into the mysticism and spirit science of the ancient occult ways. So we could go on and on about all that, but there are plenty of people out there already, dissecting all the symbolism and the little Easter eggs and, counting how many number 11s show up here and there and everything else till the cows come home. So I'm really not trying to bother with all of that stuff, but what I wanted to touch upon was just the ending, where there's this showdown with a godlike being called Dormammu, who's first referenced in that beginning astral trip sequence as the dark dimension, quote-unquote, is first introduced.
Dark places where powers older than time lie ravenous.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because it really just blew me away how this character and that whole scene just embodied the Gnostic concept of the demiurge. Now, before people start typing up elaborate comments to educate me on one way or another as to how I don't properly understand the demiurge, I'll say that let me just tell you right now that I fully understand that there's not a monolithic agreement amongst modern Gnostics as to what exactly the demiurge is or what it represents. And, some believe it's an actual real being and others believe it's just a concept or, a character, an archetype. Some believe it's the creator himself and that the creator is indeed evil and tyrannical, and others believe that it's but a very ancient and powerful godlike being who's not the creator, but more of merely an organizer or an agent used in the construction and articulation of the creation. Other Gnostics will say things like, well, we're all the demiurge in a way, meaning that they equate the demiurge with the inner ego, the traits of selfishness and dominance and something we must learn to deny in ourselves, and etc. But regardless of whatever specific views that various self-pronounced Gnostics might have of the demiurge, there's still enough of a commonality and a general construct of the idea that we can see that it does indeed factor into the broader mystery school belief system. And as I wanted to point out today, it's something that we can actually see being represented in Hollywood all over the place once you start to recognize it. It's actually one of those things that is so common and so ubiquitous that for the most part we tend to not even really think about it because it just seems like another universal plot device or universal character trait that spans human history. So, of course it would show up in drama and fiction, but I mean, obviously human history has seen its fair share of tyrants and dictators and emperors and hostile invaders and everything. So many would simply say that the demiurge is a mythologizing of a basic element in the human condition, which is, a fair enough idea. But, when you look at something like Dormammu in this Doctor Strange film, it really does take it beyond just such general ideas about humanity, and what we see is this very direct, very specific portrayal of an ancient godlike being from another dimension who is bent on conquering and ruling all the realms, all the worlds, all the dimensions of existence. Okay, so spoiler alert. All right, in this movie, the occult superhero Doctor Strange defeats Dormammu not by actually fighting him directly, because that would be impossible since Dormammu is apparently far too powerful to be defeated in direct confrontation, but rather because Doctor Strange is clever enough to sneak in a magical device into the dark dimension, a magical device which carries a piece of time inside of it. He's able to sneak time into the timeless, eternal dark dimension. Suddenly the befuddled Dormammu doesn't know what to do, and having been outwitted by this petty mortal who trapped him in a time loop. So while that might sound kind of silly, it actually very much resonates with a core underlying Luciferian concept, where God himself is viewed as a being who, though he might be all-powerful, or at least view himself as all-powerful, he's a being who can and must be defeated some way, somehow, because ultimately he is the real threat. God himself is ultimately the bad guy. He's the Satan figure in the Luciferian Mystery Babylon worldview. In their minds, God is the invader, God is the bloodthirsty, maniacal, tyrannical, psychotic, galactic despot seeking to enslave humanity. In their minds, the return of Jesus is an alien invasion, a hostile act of aggression, and an attack that must be stopped at all costs, using whatever technological and metaphysical means necessary. And so the more we see this kind of theme appearing in films, television, gaming, books, etc., the more alarming to me it becomes, because we start to realize that indeed the media propaganda machine is very much being utilized to instill this segment of the Luciferian belief into the minds of humanity as a whole. And so overall, it really just makes me think of the sorts of teachings that guys like Russ Dizdar have given on Revelation 19:19, where he actually teaches quite convincingly, from my view, that when we look at what Bible prophecy says and about the end and how the armies are gathered together at Armageddon, that in reality they are gathering together to make war against the return of Christ himself and not against each other. That was a pretty staggering idea when I first came across it several years ago, since I had never heard that idea my whole life when it came to Armageddon and the end. But the more you really look at what Revelation 19 says, and then consequently compare that to all the propaganda and to what the Luciferians themselves seem to believe and seem to be preparing for in a whole host of ways, it really does all kind of line up.
The Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement.
Welcome to the first anniversary of that branch of our armed forces that will ensure for generations that America remains as dominant in space as we are on land and sea and air. Welcome to the first anniversary of the United States Space Force. It is my honor, on behalf of the President of the United States, to announce that henceforth the men and women of the United States Space Force will be known as Guardians. The space race began in the 1950s and it continues today. And in President Donald Trump, we have a commander-in-chief who's understood clearly that space is a warfighting domain. And it's imperative that we invest the resources and the personnel and the technology to defend our nation and defend our values in the outer reaches of space. We're leading in space, but our determination under this president and with his extraordinary military leadership is to stay in the lead to defend America and defend our freedom from space. So happy birthday to the United States Space Force. God bless our guardians. God bless all the members of our armed forces. And God bless America.
As the modern-day incarnation of the ancient mystery schools, the New Age movement worships the serpent both literally and symbolically. Perhaps the most blatant manifestation of this serpent worship is through what is known as the Kundalini, or serpent energy, the latent divine power believed to be lying dormant within each person. In the glossary to her theosophical devotional called The Voice of the Silence, Blavatsky defined the Kundalini as, quote, serpentine or the annular power on account of its spiral-like working or progress in the body of the ascetic developing the power in himself. It is an electric, fiery, occult, or phohatic power, the great pristine force which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. According to the New Age, the Kundalini, which Alice Bailey defined as the fire at the base of the spine, can be awakened through practices like yoga and meditation. And once it is aroused, the Kundalini then activates 7 focal points of energy in the body, called chakras, as it is raised up a person's spine. Alice Bailey taught that the awakening of the Kundalini energy is a critical part of the New Age initiation process. In a treatise on white magic, she stated that when the Kundalini energy is aroused, it, quote, correctly makes possible the final initiations into the consciousness of the monad or God. The Kundalini concept is essentially an occult metaphorical twist on the Garden of Eden account, with the notion of the serpent bringing the gift of God consciousness or divine wisdom. Professor John White, who has extensively researched the occult sciences of meditation and higher human development, comments on the Kundalini and its correlation with achieving godhood. Quote, nearly all the world's major religions, spiritual paths, and genuine occult traditions see something akin to the Kundalini experience as having significance in divinizing a person. The word itself may not appear in the traditions, but the concept is there nevertheless, wearing a different name, yet recognizable as a key to attaining godlike stature. The Kundalini and 7 chakra centers have been a central part of the mystery school teachings since ancient times. One Hindu esoteric author confirms this, quote, the ancient symbol of serpent in all the ancient mystery schools of the world is a codified secret symbol of the human vital energy flow channels, represented in the physical body by the spinal cord, through which the vital life force, prana, in the form of a snake motion, moves in the chakras, vortex of energies. New Age author Daniel E. Mitchell claims the same. Quote, there were 7 levels of these mystery schools that taught Arat Sekhem, which means the serpent power. It was about connecting with the 7 energy points of the holy serpent fire of God within them, while traveling upon the mystical path that leads to the awakening of the Christ consciousness. Describing what occurs when the Kundalini is awakened, New Age author Cindy Dale states, our full physical and spiritual selves begin to merge. In Samadhi, all aspects of our true being, now fully activated by the Kundalini, can achieve a state of union with the divine and empower us to become our real selves. Commenting on the rise in popularity of the Kundalini in America and the influence of Eastern spiritual teacher Gopi Krishna, Christian author John Newport writes, Gopi Krishna devoted much of his life to learning everything he could about Kundalini. He considered it the most jealously guarded secret in history and the guardian of human evolution. He believed it to be the driving force behind genius and inspiration. Gopi Krishna was eager to see Kundalini awakening cultivated, especially in the West. Since the 1970s, Kundalini awakenings have been reported with an increasing frequency in the West.
With the arousal of this power, a stream of silvery energy rushes up the spine and reaches the brain.
Kundalini is a very powerful energy, and when it begins to wake up, it's almost like this force that's trying to rise up our spine.
I started experiencing energetic flows inside my body, going up my spine during that meditation.
And it clears the chakras as it moves up. I can actually feel it moving in my body.
Kundalini serpent, the energy that rises up, your animal energy can become the coronated serpent.
In fact, the brain is now fed with a more powerful energy than before.
It felt like my entire brain just lit up, like a current shot up my back into my brain.
Which causes it to become luminous.
This gray, white, luminous energy.
It expands my consciousness.
And expanded my consciousness.
And, I had experience of huge, expanded, cosmic consciousness.
An expansion within our own consciousness.
Which we can conquer through the expansion of consciousness.
So it's like my senses had expanded. It was weird. I felt connected to everything.
Job Smith is the lawnmower man. A man.
Joe, come on, boy, let's go. Grass is waiting for you.
With the mind of a child.
Yeah, Cybo Man. He came to see me.
Cybo Man? Comics, right?
Yeah, Cybo Man.
And the doctor.
Virtual reality holds a key to the evolution of the human mind.
With a vision of the future.
I have a game in my house that you might like to play. Would you like that? Yeah. Okay. That was really bad. I have different games. I even have one that could help make you smarter.
Now, Job Smith is about to enter the world of virtual reality.
gonna hit me! No, Joe, just relax. It's gonna be like being up there with the stars, Joe. They're going to another planet. His mind is like a clean, hungry sponge. I just graduated to the next level, Joe.
You're not the lawnmower man. Oh, you've certainly changed. I don't know how you did it, but I approve.
I absorbed Latin yesterday in less than 2 hours.
Joe, where are you? Joe.
A world where the normal course of events can suddenly turn inside out.
You realize, Dr. Angelo, that my intelligence has surpassed yours.
The imaginary becomes real.
Trying to get inside my head, Joe.
You can't hide anything from me, Dr. Angelo.
And reality.
We have no idea what he's gonna do.
Is all in your mind. The Lawnmower Man.
It was like I was face to face with that.
Ever take you to a crazy place, like psychedelic state?
Yeah, I had that realization that what I considered to be myself was a construction and it wasn't real. That like my memories and my perception and my desires are just a conglomeration of biochemical impulses that I'm merely a conduit of pure consciousness.
This experience of God or cosmic consciousness is actually an experience of a higher form of consciousness towards which mankind is evolving at present. Just as man climbed from the state of an animal to that of a man, he has to take another leap to reach a higher dimension of consciousness where he can perceive the creative energies of the universe.
33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall explains the occult significance of the Kundalini serpent. Quote, that sleeping serpent power in man, which coiled head downward around the tree of life, drove him from the garden of the Lord and became the symbol of the Christ. The Pharaoh was an initiate of Scorpio, and the serpent is the transmuted Scorpio energy, which, working upward in the regenerated individual, is called the Kundalini. This serpent was the sign of initiation. It meant that within him the serpent had been raised, for the true Pharaoh was a priest of God, as well as a master of men. Hall also correlated the Kundalini serpent with the Garden of Eden. Quote, the tree that grows in the midst of the garden is the spinal fire, or Kundalini energy. The knowledge of the use of that spinal fire is the gift of the great serpent. Knowing this, it should be no surprise that Satanists take a liking to the concept of the Kundalini. On an openly satanic website, it states, the serpent or snake, which symbolizes Satan, represents the Kundalini at the base of the spine, also the DNA. The serpent represents life. When this force is activated, we are healed and enlightened. Satanist Aleister Crowley also believed in the power of the Kundalini energy. He spoke of, quote, the serpent flame, and encouraged everyone to, quote, arouse the coiled splendor within you. Along these lines, some reports of what people undergo during a Kundalini awakening share a very eerie similarity with accounts of individuals who have experienced demonic possession.
Also, I've noticed that my body has started to jerk around unexpectedly.
And when it first moved, it was so intense that, I had convulsions, seizures, incredible neurological disorders, loss of memory, couldn't sleep. It was a really crazy experience. And it's funny because like when it was happening with me, people would see me and, my body would be shaking or trembling. And I was experiencing absolute bliss, but when, friends and family or whatever, I even went and saw doctors and neurologists and all kinds of stuff. People would look at me and they'd turn pale because they were like, oh my God, there's something really wrong with this guy, and nobody could figure it out. I knew what it was all along. But the Kundalini force in general can be quite powerful and create intense havoc for us. Some people get stuck like this, or their eyes roll back in their head, and that's helpful for a lot of people to kind of wake up the divine energy within us, open our channels, and help those energies to move. But Kundalini energy is just an amazing force. I found yoga to be extremely helpful, and some forms of yoga were helpful.
Just have to be completely dedicated to the Kundalini practice, and you have to go to a very specific state that's achievable once you have some mastery over the meditation and the yoga principles.
Doing Kundalini yoga oftentimes is a very good way to balance your chakras, balance your energy body, so you can stay as grounded as one can in the midst of their awakening.
Teachings on yoga. See multiple books here on yoga. Ani yoga. There's another one. Yogi philosophy.
Yoga in any way, shape, or form has the ability to corrupt the mind and undo a Christian's faith. It has as its goal the conversion of the individual into the occult. Yoga is from the Sanskrit word yug, meaning union with the divine or your higher self or your God self. Again, it's always about attaining godhood. I will be like the Most High. I will ascend unto the sides of the north, just like Satan did. And this is evidently the temptation for man. Consider the following portion from an article from a secular newspaper. It is estimated that there are 10,000 yoga teachers in the United States who teach between 4 and 5 million students a week. Man, that's a lot of people they're reaching.
E.T. fills each shoe nicely. Steven Spielberg once told the best of Starlog, there was a severe reverence on the set shown by everybody, even the guys who swept the floors, toward E.T. Severe reverence. The kids believed in E.T. the way we believe in Santa Claus, or should believe in Santa Claus. Everybody had such a belief in E.T. as a living, breathing organism that no one would dare go up to him and make fun of his appearance or make fun of his awkwardness. He really did seem to have a life of his own. Elliot, your friend is a rare and valuable creature, Keyes tells Elliot in Cotswinkle's storybook. We want to know him. If we can get to know him, we can learn so many things about the universe and about life. Keyes' fictional words line up with Spielberg's. He told Twilight Zone magazine, I think that in the presence of an extraterrestrial, the United States government, or any government of the world, would want knowledge, not conflict or hostility. I believe that we will solve all our own problems. But it would be nice to know that there's somebody up there who likes us. It helps. Dare I call E.T. satanic? But I will. I must. There is hardly a worse cause for mockery than to call anything for what it is. To call rock music satanic in a serious way, or to accuse Hollywood of the same falsehood, is cause for a burlesque rebuttal. That is because hardly anyone, and I include much of the satanic panic generation in this, seems to grasp the implication of Jesus' pacifism when he answered in John 18:36, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. The devil had already taken Jesus to an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, as Matthew records. And he, being the devil, said to him, Jesus, All these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Matthew 4:8-9. Jesus did not dispute the devil. It is indeed an eye-opening moment to shed the pounds of cognitive dissonance and come to the awareness that Satan fully manages and operates the kingdoms of this world.
It all starts out with the main character, Neo, being unknowingly trapped in a type of computer simulation of Earth known as the Matrix. It's even called a prison for the mind by one of the characters.
Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
But you have some duality symbolism sprinkled throughout the Matrix movies, like checkerboard flooring, the famous red and blue pill scene from the first Matrix. and one character even wears yin-yang earrings in the third movie, which is significant when you realize the Gnostic character she's playing. But you have the demiurge from Gnosticism making an appearance in the second and third movies. The character called the Architect is essentially this machine or program that's the creator of the Matrix and who has enslaved all mankind within it. Though in the second movie he actually speaks about a co-creator.
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. The Oracle. If I am the father of the Matrix, she would undoubtedly be its mother.
And she's actually the one I mentioned who wears the dualistic earrings, the yin-yangs. But these two co-creators seem to portray the Gnostic belief in the dual demiurge that I was talking about before. But what's more is that the name Architect for the demiurge character is pretty telling and more than appropriate, since demiurge can be translated into many English words like architect. For example, it could be translated as fashioner or artisan, craftsman, creator, designer, and plenty of other synonyms of words like those, which would obviously include architect. So architect is definitely one way to refer to the Gnostic demiurge. But even more telling is that the Freemasons, who as I said in the beginning are just neo-Gnostics, neo meaning new, but they actually refer to the demiurge as the Grand Architect, so it would seem that at least some Gnostics prefer the translation. But the architect in the movie is portrayed as this calculating, evil genius whose only flaw is his obsession with perfection.
The first Matrix I designed was quite naturally perfect. It was a work of art, flawless, sublime, a triumph equaled only by its monumental failure. I have since come to understand that the answer eluded me because it required a lesser mind, or perhaps a mind less bound by the parameters of perfection.
While the Oracle's character is portrayed as much more of a free spirit, you know, smoking cigarettes, baking cookies, and occasionally assisting humans in the upheaval of the Matrix she helped to create. So, she's rebelling against the system she helped put in place.
Kundalini awakening is typically believed to be inseparable from the practice of yoga, which also has occult and mystical roots. In his book, Yoga Sutras, the textbook of yoga psychology, Eastern spiritual guru Ramamurti Mishra states, in conclusion, it may be said that behind every psychic investigation, behind mysticism, occultism, etc., knowingly or unknowingly, the yoga system is present. Authors John Ankerberg and John Weldon state in the Encyclopedia of New Age Beliefs, quote, even yoga authorities have said that all yoga is ultimately Kundalini yoga, and that yoga is meaningless without it. This is why no less an authority than Hans Riker concludes, Kundalini is the mainstay of all yoga practices. Even Bailey and Blavatsky affirm that yoga and Kundalini awakening went hand in hand. Alice Bailey stated that Kundalini is, quote, a power known only to those who practice concentration in yoga and is centered within the spine. And Blavatsky considered yoga philosophy to be one of the occult sciences and referred to the Kundalini as, quote, one of the mystic yogi powers. The testimonies of virtually every yoga teacher destroy the false notion typically held by many in the West that yoga can be done purely for bodily exercise. Not only are the vast majority of yoga instructors well educated in the mystical components of yoga and are often devoted followers of those mystical teachings, but yoga classes typically involve many references to occult and pagan concepts and require that their students participate in them. Identifying the spiritual components and intentions underlying the yoga practice, yoga teacher Lauren Walker states, quote, the magic of yoga is the ability to transform not only your body, but also your mind and, by extension, your spirit. Although calming and stabilizing the breath is one big reason yoga has this effect on us, the specific intention behind the movements is what really makes yoga transformative. Many cultures, including Native American, Islamic, and ancient Sumerian cultures, have used movements very similar to some of the yoga movements for prayer, healing, and, we can only assume, physical well-being. There are hieroglyphs depicting some of the oldest physical movements performed by humans that look very similar to yoga poses. The movements can transform us on every level. According to Hindu tradition, man can achieve salvation and ascension through the mastery of yoga. William Quan Judge, one of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society, claimed that yoga was one of the primary methods of unleashing the all-powerful God force and awakening our higher self. He stated in Practical Occultism, quote, the true practice of yoga begins by purifying the heart. Its perfection is not attainable until the personal idea is completely uprooted. You have in you the self all-powerful and omniscient. It cannot act because the lower self hinders it. The hindrances must be got rid of. The way to do it is in Patanjali's Yoga and Bhagavad Gita. Esoteric researcher Mark Pinkham, author of the book The Return of the Serpents of Wisdom, claims that the first teachers of yoga were ascended beings called Kumaras. In the Theosophical Glossary, Madame Blavatsky defined the Kumaras as, quote, the 7 sons of Brahma, born out of the limbs of the god in the so-called 9th creation. It is stated that the name was given to them owing to their formal refusal to procreate their species, and so they remained yogis, as the legend says. In The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky elaborated further on the Kumaras, revealing that they are one and the same with the fallen angels of the Bible. Quote, of all the 7 great divisions of Dayan Koans or Devas, there is none with which humanity is more concerned than with the Kumaras. Imprudent are the Christian theologians who have degraded them into fallen angels, and now call them Satan and demons. The implications of this are obvious and serious. Mankind learned yoga from the fallen angels.
All of them. I am not being cavalier. I certainly didn't stumble upon this realization, or rather, the scales which had likely been placed over my eyes the very year I was born were not shed until I discovered what the Bible said, and what's more, believed what the Bible declares as true regarding the shape of the earth. Surely, we are being lied to by everyone. Every kingdom, including North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, Israel, and our very own, the United States of America, are operated and managed by Satan. The Bible does not disagree. Jesus did not tell Satan, oh yes, but about 1700 years from now, there will be this one country across the ocean. Oh, they're going to be my people. They're going to love me. You can't have them, Satan. NASA is most certainly operated and managed by Satan. It exists as an entity of the executive branch of government. But then let us not forget the Democrats and the Republicans. Hollywood is Satan's dominion. Nashville is Satan's dominion. Wall Street is Satan's dominion. The Boy Scouts of America probably is too. There are 192 nations currently under the UN banner, by my count. They also are operated and managed by Satan, every one of them. Our Lord Jesus wouldn't bend a knee for a single claim to fame from any of them. He did not defeat Satan by running for government. He crushed his head on the cross, and by his blood, he has snatched us away from the kingdom of darkness. His kingdom is not of this world, yet. So why must ours? Where is the outrage? Where is the, dare I say it, satanic panic? Get out of Babylon. Spielberg's highest ambition for the movie, he told TZ, I would hope the film would encourage interest from off the planet to come visit us someday. That would be nice and very rewarding. But knowing what we do of the little garden gnome and his kind, we're already being tended to. He touched Elliot's forehead, writes Kotzwinkle. I'll be right here, he said, fingertip glowing. The last line of Kotzwinkle's narrative reads, he went into the misty light with his geranium.
History has been rewritten by winners of wars. The Jesuit order, Khazars, Freemasons, and more. They pulled the veil over our eyes, and it's time to awaken. Through organized indoctrination, our minds have been taken. It's time we take our power back and we rescue our people. The Vatican and the bankers are like Resident Evil. They may have had the greatest plan that was ever concocted, but Illuminati never thought that they'd ever be spotted. They're manufacturing reality all in our heads. They tell us if the earth is flat, then we'll fall off the edge. But if it is a spinning ball, we won't fall off it then. And gravity is our imaginary magic friend. friend. Why is water always flat when unmanipulated? Why are pictures of the earth computer generated? Why you lying to us, man? That's something that we want to know. After that, you're gonna have to pack up all your stuff and go.
Dear NASA, it's becoming 100% crystal clear that you and the other space programs that are in operation are connected and are deceiving the entire world. More and more people are waking up every single day, and we are now able to see right through you.
Are you there?
What are you doing with the rest of your life?
Catching up on some me time, find God.
My soul loves Jesus. My soul loves Jesus. My soul loves Jesus. Bless his name. My soul, it loves Jesus. Oh, yes it does. Oh, yes it does. Oh, yeah. My soul, my soul. Over in the midnight hour, my soul, he speaks to my soul, tells me everything is gonna be all right. My soul, it loves Jesus. I'm so glad my soul loves Jesus. Bless his name.